Going live. It's thinking you're live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we're going to be talking about sharpening, and I want to talk about maybe saws and card scrapers and chisels and planes. I want to go over a few different things, but some of the common problems that people run into. I recently put up a question on the Hive Mind group, which if you don't know what it is, on Facebook there's a group called the Wood by Wright Hive Mind. It's kind of where I bounce ideas off people and people can ask questions, and it's a really cool community. But one of the questions I asked is, what topics do you want me to talk about? And I would say about a third of all the questions had to do with sharpening. So I want to actually talk about some of those things, such as my blade isn't square across, or flattening the back, all the other little things of multiple angles and issues that come up. We're going to have a little bit of fun with that tonight. Excuse me. So we've been getting a few things done around here. I've actually got, I've been cramming all the videos, so I have like the next 2.5 weeks worth of videos already uploaded and ready to go live as they need to, because we're going to be gone. And I'm not quite sure what we're going to be doing next week for the lives. For those of you who don't know, we do a live here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Time. But next Tuesday, we're actually going to be down in Florida. And I'm going to be spending some time with my parents and my brother, his family. So we may end up doing some weird live in the condo. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll be posting stuff for that on the Hive Mind if we decide to, or I might just skip next week. So stay tuned. We'll be finding out. Nothing on the bench report, unless there's something you want to say.
Okay, they're saying you're really quiet. I did turn you up here a little bit, but I don't know. Are you sure you're turned on?
Let me make sure. I tested it beforehand. Yeah, I'm feeding.
Is it turned on over here?
You're just saying, I want to say something. I'm going to tap this. Yeah, I'm getting full signal, so must be something on YouTube's end.
Don't know.
Yeah, audio settings for lives are always weird because you can have it at the exact same setting every time, and it'd be very different each time when it goes to live. So it's, I don't know.
Are you sure it's all turned on over here?
What's that? Yeah, you can't adjust the volume on that.
I was just making sure they were on.
Well, I could see the bars.
Oh.
You're running over the blanket, so I can't move in.
You know what?
So, yeah.
You're apparently not the sharpest knife in the box tonight.
Oh, she wanted to use that one. So we've got, there isn't much going on with her bench right now. So we got those there and over there.
It's
and,
kind of on
you shouldn't be seeing that. It's my router collection, or at least some of them. I think I have 2 more in the garage. But yeah, so we don't have too much on that. Oh, we have a big cookie down here. And that will actually be turned into a clock. It's about a little over 2 feet in diameter. We've got a few other fun projects coming up. I've got a dowel plate box coming up, a few other tool talks, and I think this Saturday will be finally, I'll actually be talking about the solar installation on our house. As I wasn't going to do a video on that, but enough people were asking me about it and wanting me to do one, so I decided to talk about our solar installation. I guess there is kind of a crossover between hand tool users and people who want to be off-grid and solar, so yeah. But enough of that. Let's actually get into the sharpening. So the first big question I normally get, or I get quite often, is that what do I do if my blade isn't square to the side? So this is my 4.5. So if I take a square and I put it on the side and I bring it down, and I am out of square a little more than a 1/16 inch all the way across. Let me actually see if I can show you this. Just push the button to alarm my car.
That was very alarming.
Yes.
Sorry.
So let me see. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this. Not the tip right here, the iron.
It would help if you switched cameras.
Yes, it would help if I could switch cameras and focus. So this is actually out of square. Where is it? There it is. About a 1/16. I don't think you're going to be able to see it. There's a bit of a gap over on the side there. which, 16th really isn't that bad. And I have a couple of them that are probably out an 1/8 inch all the way across. The first thing I have to say is it really a problem if it's out of square by an 1/8 inch or less? And generally I have to say no, because planes have this thing called a lateral adjuster, and this will allow you to then change the angle that it's cutting. So if your plane is out of square by a 16th, maybe up to an 1/8, the lateral adjuster will fix that. And so it's not something you really have to worry about, and it doesn't actually change function or cut in any way. So if you're getting worried about it being out of square, you're probably being a bit too picky. And most of the time I get this question from machinists who want everything to be exact. And it's woodworking, it's not exact. So generally don't worry about that. But I want to show you how to fix it if it is, because some people really want to fix it. So let's fix that. Now the first thing is I do almost all of my sharpening freehand. And so I'm going to teach that, but I'm also going to show it with my sharpening jig, which if I was smart, I would have grabbed it out earlier. Where'd it go? I'll just do it with this. So this is the Veritas Mark II. It is one of my favorite if I have to have a jig. It's just a really, really nice one, but it does cost an arm and a leg. They are not cheap. And my 4.5 is very dull. So any questions before I set this up? Normally I have an item on there to set the length, but I don't know where it's at right now, so I'm going to have to adjust it freehand. And what you can do is put it in here and just eyeball the height. That's what you got. Right about there.
Are you ready?
Yep.
So Flyfishinchief asked, my diamond plates have some rust on them. I guess I wasn't careful enough wiping them off before. Can that rust be removed? And if so, what would be the best way to do that?
You want to be really, really careful with that, because what happens is there's the steel plate, and then you have a nickel coating. So it's basically like chrome. And in that chrome are all the diamonds. The diamonds are held into the chrome. So if you're getting rusting, that means that it's gotten down through the chrome into the steel underneath. And the rust can propagate and start bubbling up the chrome on there. And that's not good. I don't think I would do anything more than like evaporust on there. Definitely do not use an acid vinegar mix or something like that. But I'd probably go with a little bit of evaporust on there. Just let the evaporust soak in, wipe off the excess, don't actually clean it out. You can actually leave dried evaporust on a surface. And just be more zealous about cleaning them off. So one of the reasons why I use window cleaner, glass cleaner, is this evaporates very quickly. So I'm not going to get rust on my plates. And especially with a tray like this, as the water gets down around, well, you're just holding water against the plate, and that's going to add rust. This evaporates, so I don't have any problem with water getting down around the plates. The other thing is I don't use much at all. I use 1/4 of a spritz on each plate, if that. So you don't need much. So what I've got on this is I know that, let me switch back over to this one. I know that this edge is long. So this side is sticking out a little farther than this side. And one of the things that a lot of people are going to wonder about with a jig is that they think that the jig is going to guarantee they get a straight cut all the way across there. The jig will not do that. Even with the outrigger that comes off and sets on the end and you line up the side with it, it is still not going to guarantee that, because you can still put a little more pressure on one side or the other. And the key is, whichever side you put more pressure on, you're going to take more material off of that side. So I'm going to use my Windex. Just a little bit on each one.
Put some Windex on.
Spread it around. And I'm going to put my fingers on here just like if it was freehanding. I want to have pressure all the way across the blade. And because this side is longer, I actually want to put more pressure on this side than I do on this side. Not much, just a little bit. Feel if I've got a burr. Nope, need a little more. And I'm just focusing on putting a little more pressure on this side. You can see this finger is actually coming off of it. Not quite getting there. That is far more dull than I was expecting. Yeah, I'm actually going to have to take off some material to get that burr. Whew, okay, let's do it. Because I've gotten the burr on the side that's long. I'm just trying to get the burr all the way across. Because I'm putting more pressure on this side, I'm taking off more material on this side. Now I got the burr there, and not quite there. So it hasn't gotten all the way across yet. A little more.
So how much pressure are you actually putting on
I'm
that?
probably putting about 8 to 10 pounds on this side and very, very little on this side. Almost all my pressure is pushing across this direction.
Okay. When you get to a point, can I try it?
Sure. Why don't you come over to the next point?
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure that's gotten the burr all the way across. Yeah, I've got my burr all the way across there now. Yeah, why don't you come over and do this one? You're probably going to need a stool.
Wow, guys, it's a record. I get to touch a tool this early in the show. They're all going to get a kick out of that.
I don't know if you're going to be able to get much weight on it. Here, let me do this. Got this big block.
I'm just going to savor the moment where you said I wasn't going to have enough weight to do anything. Okay, anyways.
Hey, look, you're still short. Okay, so there's a couple different ways you can hold it.
Yes.
Number one is I like to put my thumbs back in here and then put my fingers up on it.
Yeah.
Or if I really want to get some more pressure, I kind of put my hand down on top of it. And I always have a finger on the side that I want more pressure on.
Okay.
So wrap the left hand around and put your index finger or your middle finger right down on that.
Like that?
Don't let your finger slide down under the plate, otherwise you'll start shaving off skin. Yep.
But you said
And
put
think
more on
about
this
putting
side.
more pressure on this side. And then when you slide it forward, because you're up so high on it, there's
Yeah.
a tendency to roll the whole thing forward. You want to do that. You want to actually let it roll on the roller on the back.
Like this?
Yep. Longer strokes. Otherwise, you're just going to wear out that little piece of the plate.
Okay. And then how would I know to test it? When
Well,
would I feel?
What you can do
Because it just feels the same.
is if you're brand new to this, you get a Sharpie and you run all the way across. And what I'm going to do is, because I know the look of the difference between this grit and this grit, these scratches, see there's some heavy scratches right there.
Yeah.
Those are still left over from
They
this
can't
one.
see that though, can they?
No, I'm not going to be able to get a camera on that
Okay.
either. So a little more pressure too. You want
On this side?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, more pressure. It's steel. You're not going to overdo it. Just tip it.
Woo, jeez. Like that?
That should be good.
I'm not sure I got it.
You don't need much. I mean, for me, here, let me hop down for a minute. I'll show you how. Like for me, the total amount from this plate to this plate would be, and that's enough. But I'm putting.
Do it while balancing on the block.
Yeah. I'm putting a solid amount of weight down on that. And so then I can bring it. You want to try it again?
Sure.
Okay. This is the fine plate.
Sorry. I had, oh, baby, you're so fine, running through my head. Do I still want to put pressure on this side?
Yep,
Okay.
the whole way through. Just focus on putting pressure on the long side. A little more pressure. Okay.
Okay.
Should do it. And then this one. Yeah, there we got even scratches all the way across.
Woohoo.
Cool. And so in doing that, I still have a little bit of burr in here. I got to get that off. What we're going to do is bring it over here to the strop. And the strop, I'm going to put a little bit less pressure on this, probably only about 5 to 8 pounds. This is polishing it down because this doesn't give you a mirror polish. You don't need a mirror polish on there. It feels good, but this will wear off a little bit more to help that burr get loose. Flip it over. Do one on the back, one on this side, on the back. I'm just going to go back and forth on this until that burr just falls off. And a little more in that corner. It's just holding on right there, right on that edge. And there. That burr is gone. So now, yep, that's a sharp edge. So let me actually check this and see. I've probably only taken off about half of what it needs. Yeah. About a third. So I've removed about a third of that 1/16 of an inch. Yeah, gotta love the English system. A third of the 1/16 of an inch. Yes. So what I'm gonna say is, don't try and square it all off at once. I mean, you could do that by going at this and just do it on the course and grind it down until it's where you want it to be. But most of the time it's better to just know that this blade is out of square a little bit on that one, so next time put a little more pressure on that side. And almost all of my planes over here, the iron is out of square. And every time I look at it, I can just see, you know, is it out of square? If I can't tell which way is out of square, I don't worry about it. If I look at it and I can say, yeah, I think I'm out of square. I think this one's high. I'm just going to put a little more pressure on that time. And that way, eventually, then it's going to switch. And this side will be a little high, and I'll put a little more pressure on that side. And every time, it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And it really doesn't matter because the plane has a lateral adjuster, so it doesn't change anything. Now, let me grab a different one, because I might as well sharpen these up. If I'm doing it freehand, it's actually a little bit easier freehand. But the problem with freehand is you need the whole sharpening skill to actually get it. Because when you're doing it with freehand, you can't just focus on putting more pressure on it. With the jig, all you're thinking about is putting a little more pressure on one side or the other. The downside of the jig is it's always going to hold off a little bit of that pressure, so you're not going to be able to change it quite as fast. With freehand, I can just put it on here. Yeah, you do need to be sharpened. Good. I can put it on here and here, make sure focus up this way a little more. Focus and change it. On this one, I'm going to take my hand, put my fingers underneath. They're going to support it. Index finger comes up onto the corner. One index finger over here, or if there's enough space, I'll put another finger over here. And I'm going to think about putting more pressure on this side and less on this side. And I'm going to lock my body into that spot. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. Thinking about putting pressure on the other side. Like this side, you can see my fingers even coming off of this. Almost all the pressure is on that side, which I actually should check this one. I didn't even look at it. I don't think this one needs much. Yeah, it is. Okay, it's out the same way. So I do need more pressure on this side with this one. And I'm going to do the exact same thing, but you'll notice when you're first getting started at, you want to think about locking your arms, locking your shoulders, locking everything from the waist up, and have all the movement down at the ankles, so that your whole body then becomes the jig. You're holding yourself at that angle. And then eventually, over time, you'll get used to being able to do this whole motion, and your upper body can stay in one place, and your arms kind of swing a little bit more. But the problem with your arms is you want to make sure you're not rocking. You don't want your forearm going up and down. You still want to have the whole motion coming in and out. And then eventually, you'll get to the point where your arms start to learn what's flat and your hand isn't going up and down so much. And you can be doing something like this. And it just takes a little bit to think about which side you're putting more pressure on. And that's why I do it freehand, because generally from a really dull blade to a really nice sharp blade is less than a minute once you get it out of the plane and putting it back. And I don't know why I get this question all the time, but everyone is worried about their iron being out of square. Generally, don't worry about it. Even the same thing with chisels. It's the exact same thing with chisels. It becomes very, very apparent when you have a very thin chisel. Ooh, here, let me grab my 1/8 inch chisel. The 1/8 inch chisel is never square to the side. I mean, it's almost impossible. You can pick up almost any one of them. You look at it and you say, oh my, that's out of square. And let me move it over to this one. So you get small chisels. And you're still going to do the exact same thing on this. I'm going to think about, with a small chisel, you really can't put more pressure on one side or the other. But what you can do is actually take the whole thing and just rotate it a little bit. And just think about putting a little bit of rotational pressure in it. So my hand back here that's supporting it isn't actually rotating the chisel. I'm just putting a little bit of pressure turning. So do this, because I don't need much on this one. We'll be able to see it. And so in this case, my fingers back here are actually just kind of pulling up and adding a little bit of rotational pressure to it. And this is one of those things where with a blade that small and that short, it's very easy. Yeah, see, in just that little bit, I turned it the other way. And so now I need to think about turning it the other way. And with small blades like this, it's very, very easy to rotate them and change that side profile angle. A little bit more that way. There we go. That one's nice. So, what questions we got before I move on to the next
We
topic?
have lots of questions, and you'll have to forgive me if you've answered some of them in your talking,
Okay.
trying to...
So let's do a few of those before I jump into it, because I had 3 specific things I wanted to hit today, but I'm sure other people have questions.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to ask them in the order that they were asked, not necessarily related to what you're doing right this second. Let's see. Poorman asks, are you going to cover chip breakers in this?
Nah, probably not. I have an entire video where I detail how to fit a chip breaker, because the nice thing about chip breakers is they're very soft steel, and so you can modify the chip breaker to match your chisel. Because what you want is when you put them together, you want to be able to look through the rise in your chip breaker so that it has this bow on the back. Let's switch over to this one. So I'm out of focus
I was
again.
going to say,
Let's do that. So I actually want to look through this hole here, and I want to look up into it, and I want to see, is there any light coming through between the chip breaker and the iron? And if there is any light in there, I want to modify the chip breaker to then match the iron. And it doesn't take much work at all to do that. For the chip breaker, it's literally just setting it down on the plate. Then you want to lower the back end so that you're putting a bit of an angle. You want the chip breaker to touch right at the tip. You don't want any gap in between it, because if there's a gap, then the chips will come up and catch the chip breaker, and you'll get them jammed up and piled up in there. If you're getting a clog in the mouth, most of the time, people think
are sticking a foot in your mouth.
most of the time people think that the mouth isn't big enough. And 90% of the time, it's that the chip breaker is not fit to the iron. You fix that problem, and you'll fix most of your clogged mouth issues. So, yeah, take a look at that. I think it's called How to Fix a Chip Breaker. Something pretty generic. What's next?
Say hello to your mama. She just hopped on for a second.
Hi, Mommy.
Mommy, I haven't heard you call her that in a long time.
Yeah, but she might be on the live next week if we do that. We were talking about, I might man the chat and then have my whole family in the live, and you could ask my brother and my father and anyone questions about me. But that might be really dangerous, so I don't think we'll do that.
There's no secrets in the Knights of the White Oak, are there? Anyways, let's see. Caleb Sheffield. I feel like my DMT diamond plates aren't cutting as fast. Could it be that they are clogging, and if so, is there a way to clean them? We've already talked about that, right?
No, actually I haven't.
Okay, that
one
was
of the things,
something else.
when you get diamond plates, they cut incredibly fast for the first while. And they're just unbelievably fast. And then they kind of mellow out. And that's just because of the aggregate that's suspended into the chrome plate. Some of the aggregate is just not going to stick. It's not going to stay on there very long, and it's going to wear off. And that's okay. And they kind of get into this little bit more mellow. They're not quite as fast. That's where they should be, and they will stay there for a long time. The exception to that is the extra coarse, where you have the really big granular. Those tend to rip out of the substrate much faster, and so you do wear out the extra coarse plates fairly quickly. I have an extra coarse that, I don't think I've actually worn out my extra coarse plate, because mine actually started bubbling up and they shipped me a new one. And I've still used that one a few times. But I've talked to quite a few other people who have the extra coarse, and it's only lasted for a couple years or less, because it wears out the aggregate much faster. But that's why I have coarse, the medium fine, or what they're now calling fine, and then the extra fine. And those, I've had these for about 5 years now. And I've talked to people who've had them a lot longer than 5 years, and they're still running fine. But yeah, don't compare their normal running to the first several times you sharpen. They don't work quite as fast. But yeah, as to clogging them up, you've seen what I do. I just use spritz, just a tiny little bit on there. And as soon as I'm done, I just take the rag and wipe them off. And that will pull out the steel that's in them. If you need to do a little bit more, then grab a rubber eraser and go at that. I've even seen some people with window cleaner and rubber eraser cleaning them out. But I get the question quite often of, why are your plates so silvery and shiny? Mine turn black. And it's usually just because they're not wiping them off immediately. You let it sit in there. Because the steel will be suspended in your fluid that you're using. And so when you wipe it off, you're wiping off the fluid, but all of the steel that's in there. But if you let it dry on the plate, then that steel then sinks down in and connects with the surface and then clogs it up. What's next?
Let's see, Dad Gamet S. I have an old hand crank grinding wheel with a very fine stone. Do I use it or just display it?
I have actually I think I have 3 hand crank grinding stones. And I've often thought about bringing them out, but no. Usually I find it faster if I really need to regrind something. I grab some 36 grit sandpaper and I go at it with that, and less than a minute or two later I'm back to the grind I want to be, and then I take it out of my sharpening system. I find that to be faster, and I'm using the exact same method as I would be setting up a grinder. I mean, if you have a place to always have a grinder set up, then great. And I know most people are hybrid, and so actually having a powered grinder is there. Just be careful if you're using a high-speed grinder or a non-wet grinder. You don't overheat the blade, because if the tip of this changes colors, you've ruined the steel. It will not hold its edge as well as it used to. But in general, it is rare that I need to regrind things. Very, very rare. But if I do, I grab some heavy grit sandpaper. So that's my answer. Let me move on to one other topic I want to hit, and that is flattening the backs. On chisels and on planes, and people really get bent out of shape about flattening the backs. All of my chisels here, with the exception of the Aldi's, and only a few of the Aldi chisels that I had, I've never flattened the back. If I do this and it's flattish, it's good. Doesn't need anything more than that. Don't spend time on this. It is important that it is smooth, but it's not important that it be absolutely perfectly mechanically flat, because these actually do flex. And if you're using them, they're going to change a little bit here and there. Yes, people are going to say, well, what if you are pairing and you want to use a reference surface? Are you going to worry that your surface that you're planing isn't this flat? No. If I could get a board this flat, I would be through the roof happy. And so why would I worry about flattening this more when I would be happy with the surface being this flat? Flattening the chisel really isn't that important. Same thing, and even more so with flattening a plane blade. If you spend time lapping the back of the plane blade and making it perfectly flat, it's wasted time. Having the flat surface isn't terribly important. Having a smooth surface is important because you need the chip breaker to mate with it. And so if there's pitting or other scratches and things like that that will allow gaps between the plane iron and the chip breaker, then that's a spot for chips to get under there and work out. Usually, if I have an old iron that I've been restoring, it often has a lot of pitting where the chip breaker has been sitting there for years. And so what I'll do is I'll flatten it to get rid of the pitting, but then never again will I touch the back. When I'm sharpening, I never touch the back on my planes or on my chisels. The only thing I do is the stropping when I'm taking the burr off. And that little bit of stropping every time I sharpen it keeps the backs all shiny and glossy. So I never touch the back other than that final stropping to get rid of the burr. It's one of those things that a lot of people really worry about that, but does it make any difference? No, not at all. And I know that's going to start a lot of arguments. And there's a lot of machinists out there who will give you all sorts of reasons why it should. But in reality, in actual function, you have to remember that wood is a very fluid substance. It's not something you can be that accurate with. And it's not going to make your woodworking any better to be that accurate with the back of it. So don't worry about it too much. And also, when I do flatten them, I'm really only going to focus on this little bit here. I'll have it sticking over the edge. So I'm only flattening, inch and a half of the front of each one. If I'm doing chisels, I may spend some more time and do something like that. But I'm not going to spend much more time than that. And this is a fun one. If you ever talk to a machinist woodworker and you go look at their chisels that they flattened within a micron when they first got them. Go look at them now. They're not flat. I can guarantee it, because in using this, in pounding on it, in prying with it, in chiseling, they bend. There's distortion that will happen in it. And unless you flatten your chisel every time, you're going to have several thousandths of an inch out of flat here and there. So don't worry about it. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. What's the next question?
Let's see. Little Gray asks, what are the best sandpaper grits to use sharpening a plane blade?
What I normally say is...
Can I finish what he wrote? And then, I'm assuming sorry. For flattening primary bevel, and secondary bevel, I started with the 220, then 400, the 600, then 1000.
Yeah, with sandpaper, I'll usually go 600, 1000, 2000 strop, and that's about where I'd be. That's sharpening. And when you start talking about primary bevel, secondary bevel, I don't do primary bevel, I don't do secondary bevel, I just sharpen the bevel. And you can see it just takes a couple seconds each one. And so I really don't, I get it, I understand why people like secondary bevels. It's just an extra step that takes more time in my book. So I don't do that. However, I'm not saying that's bad. There are a lot of people who absolutely love it, who think who have it. It saves time for them. It functions well for them. Awesome, great. Generally, it depends on how dull the chisel is to what grit you go back to. And so in my case, if it's dull, I mean it's been working and I've let it go too far, then I'm going to take it all the way back to my coarse stone, which for sandpaper would be taking it back to like an 800 grit. And then I would go up from there. If it just needs to be touched up, I'm just going to use my extra fine and then onto the strop and back to where it was. And for my carving chisels, they never even touch these plates. They just touch the strop. I always keep them sharp and they only touch the strop. So it really depends on how dull they are. But for general use, you generally shouldn't need to go back beyond like 600, 800-ish. If you need to go back farther than that, then that usually means that you've let them get way too dull. Or, like me, they've dropped on the ground. If I need to remove a lot of material, I'll take them all the way down to like a 36 grit. When I'm flattening plain bottoms, I start at 36 grit, and I'll go up from there. So it just depends on how much material you need. Yeah. So what's next?
David wants to know, do you use ammonia-based or non-ammonia-based window cleaner?
I don't know.
You just use Windex.
Yeah, I don't even use Windex. It's the dollar store stuff.
High quality right here, folks.
Yeah. I do not leave it on the plate long enough for it to make any difference. It's spritzed on and rinsed off, and all this is a fluid to suspend the bits of the steel. You don't even need that on this. You just need a way to get the dirt off, because you can run these dry. It's just they tend to clog up a little faster. Or even use water. You just have to be more careful to dry them off so you don't get rust. What's next?
Okay, you talked about squaring up the end of a chisel.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, that was a question from John. Jose Mejia asked, what angle do you recommend on plain blades?
For a standard plain blade, bevel down 35 degrees. And I know that's going to be like, 35 degrees isn't that high? Well, it really doesn't matter what your bevel is, because the bevel's on the backside. The bevel's not actually cutting. And in the test I recently did, if you go actually back and look at the chisel test and the plain blade test, both of them show the higher the angle, you put it at a 30 or a 40 degree, you're going to get a much longer lasting edge. You put them at a lower angle, the nice thing about a lower angle is that they self-bed, they'll dive in easily. So if you sharpen it at like a 25 degree, it will bite into the wood very, very easily. And that feels great, but it will dull much, much faster. So I like about 35 degrees. That still leaves me about 10 degrees of clearance, so I can still dive into the work and get a nice good bite on there. But the 35-degree blade will last almost twice as long as a 30-degree blade. It was very surprising, the increase in life that came from a higher angle. So 35 degrees on mine. Ish, big ish. I am hand sharpening, so it's probably somewhere between 30 and 40. If I'm actually setting it up with the jig, I set the jig at 35. And then for the rest of its life, I'm hand sharpening it. And it is around 35. My chisels, my regular bench chisels, I keep those at about 30. They're pretty steep. My carving chisels are around 20 because I want to keep those very, very keen. Seeing what else there's. Yeah. What's next?
Sorry, there's lots of chat about chisels right now.
Yeah, this is one of those topics. I'm sorry for everyone, but there are lots of arguments.
Well, they're talking about which brand of chisel and.
Oh yeah, go check out the chisel test. That was a fun video.
So, let's see. DBaca Maker asks, my question is how much burr to go for? I always get what I think of as enough burr, but it's never enough.
You don't need much at all. I just do it until I can just barely feel it. The tiniest amount is all it's needed. As long as I can feel it all the way across the blade, I know I'm good. You don't need anything more than what you can possibly feel. If you're doing more burr, that just means you're using more of your iron, and it won't last you as long. You don't need much, just enough to feel it. Yeah, and the other problem is if you have a large burr on there, that can actually be detrimental, because when the burr actually comes off, it will take some of the tip with it because it has more mass behind it to remove more there. So to have a smaller burr, the finer you can make that burr, the easier it will break off the tip without removing much of the tip material with it. What's next?
Okay, I'm not sure we're going to get through all these questions. So,
okay. Well, we will get... yeah, I have one more thing I might want to talk about. Will probably come up in questions. So we'll get to as many questions as we can. If we can't,
okay, while I'm cutting and pasting for a second.
A super chat, we'll jump to that.
Super chat will jump. Tell them if we don't answer how they can contact you.
Oh yeah, there's lots of different ways. If you go to my website, there's a contact me page. You can fill out a form on there. I have my emails listed a few places, and then social medias. I respond to most all of them. Email's the one I will. Email is my to-do list, so that one's the one I will guarantee to answer. It just may take me a few days. But I try to respond to all social medias.
Which is jameswright@woodbywright.com, if they don't know your email.
No, I try not to say it in comments. It's posted in some places, but otherwise there's scrapers and things like that.
Sorry. I wouldn't know where to go otherwise.
Yeah, if you ever want to find a YouTuber, you go to their channel page. So in my case, that is youtube.com/woodbywright. And then there is an about. There's the bar of their videos, their playlists, and so on. And the last one is about. And on there's a place where you can fill in. I am not a robot, and you can get the email. Most YouTubers have a contact email, and that is usually the best way to contact a YouTuber. What's next?
I just whack you in bed. Anyways. Sorry. Okay, we've had several questions about the grit of your diamond stones. If you can answer that one real quick.
Okay. Big caveat: grit on diamond stones does not equate grit on whetstones. Does not equate grit on sandpaper. Grit is the amount of bumps per inch, but that really doesn't equate because they cut very differently. On whetstones, you actually create a slurry on top. The water eats away and the steel eats away the grit, and that grit is actually sliding around. And it's all those particulates that are loose. Those are what are actually cutting the blade. And so you actually get this almost orbital movement as the grit slides around and gets out of the way. And that's why you can get a much more polished look off of whetstones, because the grit is going in different directions. On diamonds, you don't get that slurry. The thing that's actually cutting it are the diamonds sticking up, and as the plate goes by, it scratches. And so with diamonds, you get a very linear scratch. So you can't get that polished look off of diamonds. And so that's why a lot of people really get frustrated with diamonds, is they can't get that polished look off them like they can with the whetstones. It's because they cut differently. It doesn't mean that they're any different. Grit-wise, they're actually listed at, I want to say, 600, 1,000, and 1,200-ish. But cutting-wise, it would actually be closer in whetstones to like probably about 800, 2,000, 3,000 to 4,000-ish, in relation to how fine they can get the edge. So yeah, generally what I'm going to say is the ones I have are DMT, and their sizing, they don't actually list grit. They will list coarse, extra coarse, medium, medium fine, extra fine. And so I have coarse, medium fine, or what they now call fine, and then extra fine. So those are mine. But if you go to my website, I have a whole list of suggested tools. There's a link to it down below. And I actually link to the exact ones that I have. What's next?
Okay, there's been a couple of questions about a ruler trick.
Yes.
So we'll jump to that. Some of these, as I said, I'm going to go for the most consistent right now.
Cool. This actually brings me to one of the other topics that is one of the hardest things for someone learning freehand. And that's one of the big reasons why there is a ruler trick, is the difficulty with learning freehand. I'm going to do it over here on the strop. So what we've got here is, imagine for a moment I'm sharpening freehand, and what most people do when they begin is I'm going to exaggerate this, but there's this scooping motion. So when it's back here, the chisel is high, and when it's out here, the chisel is low. So I'm actually going to be cutting a rounded curve on the bottom. Now that really isn't a problem. Actually having a rounded bevel isn't going to change the cut or function at all, and it actually gives you a really good bevel, because your actual cutting edge, the very tip, is a high angle, so it's going to give you a very resilient edge. And so not having a good flat bevel is not a problem. Don't worry about that. The problem is in duplicating that rounding. And when you're first getting started, that's very, very difficult, because it's easy to then feel that bevel and lock into it and then hold it at that. But once you are starting to rock and you get that rounded bevel, then you can't ever feel it because it's rounded. You're making a contact no matter where you are. And the problem is, when you're actually doing it, you come back here and you go right up on the tip, and your only touch is that one little bit at the end, you then get a blunt tip, because it's actually going to wear off the tip when you're up on an edge. Super chat. Get to you in just a moment. Making sure I'm on the right track. All right, so the problem with that is you're going to be wearing off the very, very tip of it, which is where it needs to be sharp. And so getting that arm at the right spot is very, very important. Now you can fix this with the ruler trick. Let me grab, I know I've got one around here somewhere. Hey, there's my ruler. It is a very, very thin little ruler. And this is one that several people use. I can't remember the name of the guy. It was, I don't know. Rob Cousins was the one who I first saw it from, and he's the one who probably talks about it more than anyone else. But the nice thing about that is you can put that on the plate here. And so I can put it on this side. And then I can bring this over here. And I'm basically putting a back bevel on the iron, but I'm just putting a very, 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 very tiny back bevel. I mean, it's only off by like 1/4 of an inch difference. And so I'll run it across the plate this way, with the back lifted up by the thickness of this ruler, which is, very thin. And so what that'll do is, if I did round this, lifting it up accidentally, that'll take off a little bit of material on this side, so that I get back to that clean, sharp corner. And if you're freehanding and you do accidentally come up on the edge, this will fix it. And this will give you that perfectly sharp edge right up there. I don't do it because it's one more step, and once you learn the methodology and you learn the muscle memory to do it, it's kind of superfluous. But when you're first getting started, the ruler trick of setting it on the plate and letting the tip just touch the edge will fix your problems. And it is amazing night and day the difference that makes. And I know enough people who absolutely love this and do it consistently because it does give you that consistent edge. If you have problems with consistency, this thing will fix it. It's one of those cool little tricks. So yeah, if you want to see that, go to Rob Cosman. He uses it in almost every video. He's got several really good talks on it, and so definitely, if that's something you want to see, check it out. What was the super chat?
You have two. So Little Gray said we're not all Jedi sharpeners. I hope Kruger sees this.
Rex?
Oh, ha. Okay, I was like, who's Kruger? Sorry, Rex. You always say Rex, so I was like, I don't know what that is. So thank you, Little Gray. I think we answered all your questions. But if I missed one, let me know.
Did you have a super chat?
Woo! And then Flyfishinchief also super chatted and had the question, if I put the rusty diamond stones in the evaporust, how long would you suggest soaking them in there?
Oh, just an hour or two, maybe 6 at the absolute most. If it's just surface rust, you don't need much at all. And if it's just a localized rust, just put the evaporust on there and let it literally dry out on the surface. And that will protect it. One of the cool things about evaporust is if you soak it, you let it put on there, and you bring it out, and you let the extra evaporust actually dry out on the surface, it provides a protective surface on there. So it's kind of a cool finish. So it actually will protect it, not just remove the rust. Very, very cool product. But yeah, it won't take long at all if it's just a little bit of surface rust. But yeah, I wouldn't soak it much more than 6 hours at the absolute max.
Freddy Krueger.
What?
Someone said Freddy Krueger.
Freddy.
I won't talk to you about the nightmares I had as a 6-year-old. We don't mention that name. Yes, of course.
What do we got?
Why does Waldo always wear stripes?
Why?
Because he doesn't want to be spotted.
How did I miss that one? What's next?
Oh my gosh, gotta catch up on the chat. Okay, was there anything else you were going to talk about, or did you talk about everything?
No, I've hit the points I wanted to hit, and so the questions have brought those around.
I thought we were
10, 12 minutes left, so.
All right.
We'll get to as many as we can. If we can't get to them, I'm sorry. Unless you throw up a super chat, then we'll jump right to it.
Okay, let me look through. Okay, because we're not going to get to them all. I'm sorry. I'm going to kind of pick and choose some of these questions because we've talked about sharpening carving chisels. Yes? No?
Not today, but I have quite a few videos on how to sharpen gouges, so I want to take the time and do that. If you want to see that, I actually have a live video where we went through a bunch of carving chisels. But yeah, I usually sharpen mine at around 20 degrees. Okay,
so there's a couple sharpening ones, and second mom joke. We'll get there. I'm going to...
All right, give me a question. You can pull that up.
Okay, so there was one about sharpening an axe, and there was one about a router plane bit, and then what is the worst tool to sharpen?
Okay, I can get those. So an axe. I've got a hatchet right down here. For those, I can do it this way. But this is very, very painful. It's just hard to do. So what I'm going to generally do is grab a screwdriver, and I'm going to pop out my plate. And either this then brings it easier to get this down on, or what I generally do is turn it around, and I'll actually use the plate, and I will use it this way to do this spiral pattern on there. That allows me to hold it at the angle I want. And I can get a nice burr on there. Oh, this one is really dull. I've got to spend some time on that. Wow, I got to spend a lot of time on that sometime here. But here, let me actually show you this a little bit closer. So I'll set this on here and get the right side of the plate. Get my thumb out of the way. And I'll just hold it at the appropriate angle. and then do a small rotation like that. And so usually that's what I'm going to be doing for axes, hatchets, and things of that nature. Some of them, like you get into ads, and that's a whole nother ball of wax. Got a mom joke? I flip this out. Should I do routers now?
Some of these are just terrible.
Oh, here, let me do the... Here, I gotta pull this out. So for the router planes, I'm actually going to take the plate out. And I'm going to put it over here on the edge of my bench or the edge of whatever I have. And I need to do it on the edge of my bench here, because that's not long enough.
We have another super chat then too, so I gotta.
Okay. So I'll bring it over to the edge of the bench. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, except for I'm going to rock it until it touches. And I'll lock my fingers on there. Just like that, I can get my edge.
Hang on.
So it's just about locking off the edge. Now I know Veritas actually sells them where you can take the foot off as a screw. It makes it a little bit easier. And so just like with the planes, I don't touch my back. I'll just go until I have a little bit of a burr there. So it just needs a little bit more. This one's not terribly dull. I might as well clean it up. Just like that. And then I've got a loose strop. I'll set that right on the edge of the bench. Move this over here so you can see this a little better. I'm going to set that on the edge of the bench. Boop. Do that. Do that. And just letting it lean over. Sharpen it just like a chisel. Just a very, very small chisel. What do we got on the super chat?
Let's see. Dennis Miko said, "How much would you charge to sharpen blades?"
You know, that's one of the things I really wish I could do, because the skill for sharpening is it is a pure skill, and the only way you can learn it is to do it. And unfortunately, when you're going to do it, you're going to mess it up. That's just part of the life. You cannot learn to freehand sharpen without messing up hundreds of times. And I really wish I could do one-on-one, because the few times I've been able to do that, it makes a huge bit of difference that I can see, oh yeah, raise your elbow up just a little bit. Okay, yeah, there you go. And that little bit of movement suddenly is a night and day difference. And the problem is, though, even with that one-on-one treatment, I can get someone to get into sharpening and show them exactly what they need to do. But that one time is not going to give the muscle memory. You need to do it that way dozens of times to get the muscle memory. And so it's one of those things that you only get from years of doing it. And unfortunately, years of doing it means that there are years of less accurate results. What mom joke we got?
These are terrible dad jokes in this book. You ready?
Yes.
What do you get when you cross an Olympic swimmer with an elephant?
What?
Swimming trunks.
Oh, was that easy? I was going to say that, but no, that's not going to happen.
All right, I think we're another one behind. Ready? Why did the yogurt go to the art exhibit?
To get some culture?
Because it was cultured. Yep, good job.
I
I thought you might get that one. I'm sorry, guys. I did not have time to prep a lot of mom jokes this week, so I'm slacking the last couple weeks. I got to make up for it.
So the question was the hardest thing to sharpen, and that for me is a bull adze.
Yourself?
No, it comes to a point. It's very nicely sharpened.
I know, I'm the one that has the divot.
The bull adze, because it's difficult like a hatchet or an axe. It's something it's going to take that. It takes a muscle memory of locking in at that angle. But the problem with a bull adze is you have to lock it in at that angle, and you have to lock it in this angle, and lock it in at this angle. And it's just it's kind of like trying to hit a moving target. It is a very, very difficult thing to work, and
they've never
why.
seen you throw.
Apparently,
I'm only good at making fun of you tonight.
Most people who use bull ads for a living or regularly, they have mechanical grinders that are jigs that they can set and go ring, ring, and they're a lot like the bull gouge jigs that you can get for turning tools. And it's the exact same thing, except for it's a huge bull gouge. Incredibly difficult to get right and get a nice clean edge all the way across. It is, I still have never gotten an edge on one of these that I'm really happy with. And I've got a bowl over there that I want to make with the bull ads. I made the bull ads, but I still haven't been able to get this as truly sharp as I want to get it to do that. And once I actually get that, it's probably going to take me another 24 attempts at actually sharpening it and getting it to the point where, yeah, okay, I like this. We can work with that. Because I want to learn the muscle memory needed to do that. And the only way I'm going to do that is by doing it over and over and over again and messing up as I go. So that means, yeah, I got to dedicate some time to it. But eventually, I'll get it. And then once I've got it, it's quick and easy from then on because it's that muscle memory. I just sit on there and I go to town and it's done. Just like now with chisels and plane irons, I don't even think about it. It's, a chisel, it's 30 seconds or less. I do it and I come back and I'm done. With a plane, the annoying part is taking the plane apart. If I didn't have to take the plane apart to sharpen it, I would sharpen them every 5 minutes or so because it's incredibly easy. It's taking it apart and putting it back together that actually takes the time. What's next? 3 minutes left. Let's see if we can get one or two more.
Yeah, let's see. I was trying to see if there was a consistency. There's been some questions with like oil stones and wet stones and then just using like oil versus water. So I don't know if you want to touch on that real quick.
Okay, yeah, because you have sandpaper, you have wet stones, and then you have diamonds. In wet stones, you have oil stones and water stones. And some people like to say oil stones and wet stones, but oil stones are also wet stones because there is another category of dry stones, but they're very rare. And so, yeah, the reason that you have wet stones is because there is actually dry stones. And so water stones and oil stones are both wet stones. Unless you talk to people who it's oil stones and wet stones, then terminology is always fun. Whenever you're talking about wet stones, there is a very wide variety of different types. You have natural stones, you have man-made stones, you have ceramic stones, you have all sorts of variations all the way across. Every one of them is going to have different points of these ones cut faster than those ones, these ones are finer than those ones, these ones wear out faster, you have to spend more time flattening them. And the options are just endless. It's one of those things that's just, it's absolutely mind-boggling when you get into it. The big upside to all wet stones is that they are so fun to use. You get this glossy, smooth surface off of it. You can get up to these like 16,000 grit stones that give you this amazing polish that's just incredible. Looks good, feels good. That amazing polish isn't going to actually produce a better cutting tool though. Once you get over about 3,000 or 4,000 and you hit a strop, anything after that's not going to show up, and that really keen edge you get is just going to disappear in the first 3 or 4 strokes. So it's about feeling, not about performance. The downside to them is that they're messy. You have to always keep them wet or always keep them oiled. You have to regularly flatten them because they do naturally come out of flat because you are wearing and wear the surface over time. So they do take a lot more work to maintain and use. Diamond plates are very annoying for a traditional user because you don't get that polish on them. You can't get the mirror finish you're looking for, but that's because they cut differently. The nice thing is they cut faster. You don't have to flatten them. They're not messy. They're there. I take a rag and wipe it off. This rag is actually a white hand towel. Don't tell my wife. But it changed this color from years of wiping off over the time. That's actually steel that's embedded in there now. And so these are efficient. If you like sharpening and you do it regularly, you are probably going to like whetstones. If you don't like sharpening and you just want to get it done and get back to it, you're probably going to like diamonds. 6 of one, 12 of another. Now, when you look at water stones and oil stones are nice because you can go straight off of oil sharpening and go right back into your work. So you can actually have an oil stone on your bench, making it much easier to do the rotation because the oil is not going to harm the steel. It's not going to rust it. With water stones, you have to be far more careful when you take them off. You want to keep your water sharpening station away from your bench. You want to make sure you get all the water off of your blade before you put it back in because you don't want to be introducing that rust into the plane, and it goes back and forth. So price-wise, initially sandpaper is the cheapest. You get the man-made whetstones. Those tend to be the next step up. And then usually the next step is the diamonds. And then the next step are the natural stones, the quarried stones, the whetstones. So it depends on, that's the initial price. Now the most expensive to do over a lifetime is definitely sandpaper because you have to buy it over and over and over again. And so it's kind of one of those things. Initial outlay, I tell people when you're first getting started, get some sandpaper. You can get sharpening really quickly. Or some of the diamond paste on glass, the Scary Sharp system, that's kind of cool. And then you start getting into all sorts of other systems out there, and there are tons of them. But yeah, maybe I'll do a whole video sometime on just different sharpening methods, different sharpening systems.
I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of questions, and we still have a lot we didn't ask, and there's some in the chat I haven't even pulled out because we're out of time.
Well, then maybe I'll have to do some more sharpening videos here because it seems like there's a decent desire for it. I'm probably about a quarter of all my videos are sharpening related, so there's a reason for it. If you want to see more, I actually have a couple lives where I did how to sharpen everything, and I went through all of the tools in the shop and briefly touched on each one of them, the sharpening method, what I use, and what some other people use. So feel free to check that out. So I think we'll wrap it up here. I don't know if we're going to have next week's live. If we do, I will let everyone know on the Hive Mind. And if we do, it'll be something interesting coming from Florida. But we'll see how that goes. So anything I'm forgetting?
Oh, we'd have to remember it's an hour ahead.
Yeah, so we'd start at 9 o'clock there.
Or maybe we'll just totally shake it up and do it at a different time.
Who knows? Maybe I'll do it from the beach.
You wouldn't have to do anything to convince me to be on there. Nope.
Cool. I think that'll do it. So until next time, have a wonderful day.